If you've ever done any serious Chocobo racing or breeding in Final Fantasy XIV, odds are you've looked at one of these two guides for info: Final Fantasy XIV Chocobo Racing WordPress or the Icy Veins guide. I'm not a Chocobo expert by any means, so I can't speak to the relative overall quality of either resource, but I want to zoom in on this section here in both guides regarding how the weather works. Both guides lay out some pretty straightforward rules for weather changes, and I specifically want to highlight these two. First, that the weather can't change to a weather of the same type as the previous weather, and second, that if the weather starts as neutral, it has to change at least once during the race. So, weather in Chocobo races is categorized into three groups: fair, foul, and neutral, each containing a few different weather types. This first rule says that if the weather is clouds, a neutral weather, it can't change directly to fog, another neutral weather. The second rule is saying that if the weather starts as a neutral weather, it can't stay as neutral over the course of the entire race. This seems really straightforward, right? Except for one thing. The weather in Chocobo races never starts as neutral. In fact, there's no randomization to the start at all. Every single race starts as fair skies, every one. And that starting fair skies weather can change to anything, even another fair weather type. I have personally observed multiple instances of that starting fair skies weather changing directly to clear skies or heat waves, both of which are also classified as fair weather. So, what's going on here? I wasn't playing the game until Shadowbringers, and I didn't do any Chocobo racing until Endwalker really, but there's absolutely no way a rule as definitive as neutral weathers must change at least once would be laid down and accepted as fact if races never started as neutral weather, so clearly something has to have changed at some point. The original author of the WordPress guide did some pretty extensive tracking of the weather changes over the course of a ton of races, documented in a spreadsheet linked to in a Reddit post that would later become the basis of the weather section of her WordPress site. And there's no exceptions to these two rules there in the data collected up through patch 2.55. The next two major updates to Chocobo Racing occurred in patches 3.25, which added the Chocobo challenges, and 4.3, which moved Chocobo Racing to the Duty Finder, so my assumption was that the weather change must have occurred in one of those two patches. Unfortunately, there's no mention of racing weather in either of those patch notes, and since this change isn't even widely known today, it's not exactly easy to find people talking about it at the time to figure out exactly when it occurred. So, unless we have a time machine or some other way to look directly at Chocobo races at a specific point in time, this has to remain a little bit of a mystery. So I watched all the Chocobo races uploaded to YouTube, sorted by date, until I stopped being able to find any that started with weather other than fair skies. And much to my surprise, this change happened much later than 4.3. In fact, I was able to find a few videos uploaded post-Shadowbringers that started as non-fair skies weather. Unfortunately, around then the uploads got very sparse, and since fair skies is pretty common in the first place, it's really hard to nail down anything more definitively than that. And there's always the possibility that those videos were recorded right before Shadowbringers and uploaded only a little bit afterwards. My best guess as to when exactly this change occurred is that it almost definitely happened before patch 5.3, when another extremely minor update to Chocobo Racing happened, in this case having races automatically start after 30 seconds in the Duty Finder. I can't find any videos starting with non-fair skies weather uploaded between patches 5.1 and 5.3, so I think the update may have been in 5.1. But it's also possible that it was even earlier and people just took a while to upload their older videos. It's really impossible to say with just the evidence I have available to me. At this point, I feel like I should mention that I don't like Chocobo Racing and I don't actually care about it very much, but this has consumed my life now for like 2 weeks. This is actually a pretty non-negligible update since it really skews the ratio of fair to foul weather in races now, since every race is guaranteed to start as fair weather, and if it changes at all, the second weather can also be fair. But I'm not enough of a Chocobo Racing fiend to say if it actually has any impact on anything major. The Final Fantasy XIV patch notes are generally very thorough, but they're not exhaustive, and these sorts of silent updates do occur with some regularity. As a recent example near and dear to my heart, Dawntrail updated the fisher skill Fish Eyes to work on fish from Shadowbringers, which is a huge change, and didn't mention it at all in the patch notes, even though every previous Fish Eyes update got mentioned in those notes. But on Dawntrail morning, I got up and the first thing I did was test it out, and it worked. So, I guess the moral of the story here is assume nothing and doubt everything, and every once in a while make sure you go back and recheck even your most basic assumptions, because they might have randomly been changed when nobody was looking. Thank you.